Hi, everyone. Thank you for tuning in today. I am here with Ike and Chantel, and we're going to be talking about budgeting for your MD applications. It's something that is really important to think about because if you are applying for, say, starting in 2020, you're going to experience a lot of expenses along the way through your MCAT, your applications, and your interviews. So we're going to talk about each of those steps and the costs. And we're going to give you some ideas on ways to mitigate those costs. And we're also going to talk a little bit about working while prepping for med school and how you can juggle that and make it work to your advantage. So we'll start with introductions. I'm Kendra Hawk. I'm the Associate Registrar for Enrollment Management with the MD program. And I'll let you guys introduce yourself.
My name is Ike Okafor. I work in the Faculty of Medicine, Senior Officer Service Learning and Diversity Outreach.
I'm Chantal Phillips. I'm a medical student here at U of T, going into my second year in August. I'm also the co-president of Black Medical Students Association.
All right. Thanks very much for joining me today. This is something that for sure Chantal and Ike have been talking about through the community support and just their Chantal's own experience. And we really wanted to share the work that they've been doing about this with you so that you're not getting any unexpected surprises when you are going through your MD applications and when you start. For sure, you're all getting in, so when you get into med school. So we're going to look at the costs in the same order that you would experience it as an applicant. And so we're going to talk sort of as though you are someone who's applying for school this year, which the deadline for Ontario applicants is October 1st. And that means you would be starting in August 2020. So what expenses for someone who is thinking about this would students have already incurred or they're about to pay for this summer? What's the first thing?
Well, would it be the MCAT preparation cost? So whether or not, like if you're doing a course, you're looking at between $1,500, $2,000 and up for that course that you're taking. And then there's also the cost of writing the MCAT, which are about $450, I think 400 Canadian.
Yeah.
They change each year.
Each time. So this is something Ike and I have talked about, and probably you've thought about too, Chantel, is it's important to try not to have to rewrite the MCAT. I know it's easier said than done, but every time you write it, it's an extra cost as well. So that MCAT prep can be really important. The cost of the course is prohibitive for a lot of people. So what are some things that you can do other than the course if you just don't have the money or just can't? And well, maybe it's not even the right format for you. So what are other ways people prep for MCAT other than paying for a course?
Yeah, so I didn't actually use a course. I did a self-study plan. So I initiated my study schedule just by looking at blogs and reading a lot of papers about what other people have been doing in terms of their prep, if it was more personal. So that helped me to identify like what a healthy schedule would be, a study schedule for the whole summer.
Healthy and effective, right?
Exactly. And then I used a lot of Khan Academy. So they have a lot of free videos online that go through a lot of the lessons that are within the curriculum for the MCAT that's testable.
And that's, I can put the link up, but it's KHAN if you haven't used it before. It's actually great for everything. I use it for math for my kids. So.
Yeah, and it's nice for people who are visual learners because if you don't get that engagement in a class, you can have someone still teaching you for free. So I really benefited from that. And the third thing I would say is getting a study group. And so if you have other people keeping you accountable, you can even share resources amongst yourselves. So if one person is buying a package that for Princeton Review, for example, or any other type of brand of books, then that could be upwards of maybe $250. Right. But if 2 to 3 people are sharing a set of books, there's I think 6 books involved, then you can split the cost amongst the 3 of you, which is great.
Right. So is it $250 per book, 6 books, or is it $250 for the 6 books?
Oh, for the whole package.
For the whole package.
Yeah, so that you can get books on Amazon, but you can also get used books. So another thing I've found is the books don't need to be brand new. They can be from libraries. I've seen people selling books through garage sales or even online at if they have these sale groups through your university.
Right.
On Facebook, you can see if people are selling their books and you can get them that way as well.
Yeah, and I always encourage people to get connected with other people who are applying to med school. So whether that is like some sort of club on campus, there's lots of different pre-med clubs that you can join. So that would be a great way to get some used books for the people who've moved on and get some tips. And you can also like end up splitting up multiple resources. Like some say Princeton Review is the way to go. There's probably other question banks that you can buy. And I was saying earlier, you can't forget about your local library as well. Like here, the Toronto Public Library has incredible resources, and also, of course, the University of Toronto library system and whatever university you go to.
Yeah, and to add to that as well, like with the Community of Support program, we also have a library of MCAT books.
Oh, great.
From previous years. So.
And is that a physical thing for people in Toronto, or?
Yeah, it's
virtual?
A physical thing.
Okay.
At this point it is. So if you're part of COS, we'll be sending out a link this week. So it's a library system that we have where you could actually rent the materials.
Great.
And take those. Another cheap way, I guess, or low cost way of preparing for the MCAT. It's also through our free course called the MSSP, so the MCAT Student Support Program. We've been running it now for 3 years. And so what we do is we provide students with an 11-week course. It runs from May to July. So we just wrapped up our course for 2019.
And it's here on St. George campus, right?
It's in person as well as online.
Oh, okay.
And so we have weekend as well as weeknight classes. And if you are physically not in the GTA, you can stream into it. So we use Slack. So we have students from as far as Vancouver in Canada
amazing.
participating in the course this year.
Great.
And for those who we even actually, so we had 70 students in the class online and in person. And then we also had about 50 students that we shared the recorded lectures with that were technically not part of the course, but had applied and weren't admitted, but we had also shared that content with them. So it's a good resource, I think, for students. Just over a third of the students from our first cohort were admitted to medical school. We've been doing this for 3 years, so it's pretty successful with the students as well. And as per your point too, it's also good because you make connections with other students.
Yeah.
And also
support.
with medical students. Yeah. And you also get that sort of practical advice from medical students in terms of how to strategize because they act as both the tutors in the different sections for cars and for, for physics, chem, et cetera, but they also are mentors, I guess, for our students too that are in the program.
And, this is something that ever since I learned about Ike and the community support and their MCAT prep course, is it at cost or I kind of want to start a revolution of students, pre-med clubs, getting their own MCAT courses at cost. If everyone banded together, then you could cut out the middleman and get rid of these like predatory costs for the MCAT prep course. Sorry, this is me getting a little political. I remember advocacy is one of the attribute clusters. So all of this kind of work, making med school accessible to everyone, that's a form of advocacy. So I love fire under someone's.
Yeah, there's definitely, I think definitely there are costs. This is something that, folks from within the medical system at different schools and at the national level have acknowledged as well, right? So more needs to be done. So we definitely, I definitely share that sentiment. And we are we've had conversations with schools. We've helped two other medical schools in Canada start their own free MCAT prep courses.
That's great. Yeah.
And we look to expand as well into the future.
Yeah,
that's fantastic.
So you finished your MCATs, you got like amazing scores. I don't even know what's an amazing score on your MCAT. You got perfect, basically. You got perfect on your MCAT, and you're ready for the next step, which is to actually apply to the programs. And I say that that's the next step because especially if you're just budgeting and money's tight, I don't recommend applying and clicking pay until you know that you have the right MCAT results to get into the schools that you want to go to. So U of T is a threshold, and it's very clear cut, 125 in each four sections with the allowance of 124 in one section. And if you don't meet that threshold, just save the money for rewriting the MCAT or whatever, and don't apply that year because you're putting a lot of effort into something that really is not going to work out for you.
Be strategic.
Yeah, be strategic.
Yeah, you don't need to apply to all of the medical schools. You can see what your results are catering to, like what type of student are you, what skills do you demonstrate, and so you don't necessarily have to feel that pressure to spend the full amount on every single application,
right?
Because you can identify where you're competitive and then you can strategize your budget accordingly.
Yeah. So what is that kind of budget? If we're looking at students who are going to use OMSAS and apply to medical schools in Ontario, what kind of costs roughly? I mean, they're going to change from year to year, but what should people be budgeting for?
So it depends on where you're applying. If you're applying in Ontario, then there's going to be a fee just for the registrar. So that's approximately $220. At least that's what it was the last time we had checked.
Yeah.
So before you even apply to the individual schools that you've chosen, there's that one fee. And then after that, you're going to have to consider the cost of each individual school that you apply to.
Right.
And so that can range from approximately, I think, like $125, and there's upwards of that to maybe about like 100 to 125. So make sure you are assessing each school and what their costs are, because they're not all the same. There's also transcript fees, which is something that I didn't really think too much about.
Yeah, I actually had forgotten to put it in our rough sketch until Chantel mentioned it. But there's a real cost involved in those transcripts. At least with OMSAS, it's just once, right?
Exactly. Yeah, so you don't really consider every single time you're releasing a transcript or the number of transcripts you need to order. And each university actually has different expenses that cater towards ordering transcripts. So some schools, they could be maybe $12. Other schools, it could be $25.
Yeah.
So if you're at like a private college, for example, it could be way more expensive than if you were at like a larger public institution.
Right.
So you should consider that as well.
Yeah. And if you're applying outside of Ontario, you need to apply directly to those schools. They don't have, the other med schools in Canada don't have the equivalent of OMSAS. So you're paying for your transcripts to go to UBC, to Dalhousie, McGill, whoever you're applying to. So something that you need to take into consideration.
So so you're all in if you're applying to all schools plus the OMSAS fee. You're looking at about $1,000 for this province.
Yeah.
So another cost that people sometimes encounter for their applications is that they pay for someone to review their application. So what is your experience with that? Any comments on that?
Well, I haven't been on the applicant side, but we do offer a free service. I definitely think that getting the opinion of someone who's been through the application cycle before is invaluable for a number of different reasons. Also very practical, and so it is something that I encourage. But the cost can be prohibitive for many students.
Yeah.
And so it is a service within COS that we offer for free.
Okay.
It's called SASE, Student Application Support Initiative, which we've been running since we started.
I like the name. SASE.
So we match students. It's a good name.
Yeah, right. Honestly.
Probably haven't heard it said that way, have you?
No.
We were like sassy. Yeah, the sassy.
So we actually, this year we put it online because previously I was manually matching people, mentors and mentees. But we have a system now, the platform where you can log in and you have access to all the mentors, and you can pick mentors based on what school they're from, what medical school they're from, when they're available. Typically, we offer the service from June to September. If the person did undergrad, if they did masters, et cetera, the bio that they wrote, their availability, where they're located, all those sorts of things.
Right.
And we have mentors from across Canadian medical schools from across the country that are alumni, but are also champions and, friends of ours that are at different schools. And so that's one way that I think you don't want to leave it to the last minute, like the week, like the week before it's due. Think about we're here talking about costs. So you have to think about the investment that you're making in the cycle. Not only that, but like all the years that you've been spending preparing for medical school. You don't really want to leave if you're a university student, obviously if you're if you're watching this, if you're high school, you're like starting early, I guess. But that you can't, you're not going to get at this point when you're in undergrad or you're in masters, you know that you're not going to get the best mark if you're leaving something to the night before. You need to revise multiple times. So you need to treat your application the same way in terms of doing multiple. And that's what we offer, someone who's been through the process, who can provide you with insight, provide you with advice for multiple drafts of your personal statement and just the whole application itself, because there's brief personal essay questions that our university will ask, and then even students will have questions on references. Who should they select as references? So our mentors help answer those questions. Yeah,
I would definitely reinforce that point about time. As much as it's a financial investment, it's also a time investment. So you need to realize how much time are you putting in, and will you achieve the return that you are hoping for? Because for some people, they require the whole summer. Like as soon as the application's released, middle of July, they need to spend as much time as they can because of the way that they process information and potentially how long it'll take for you to write the essays. Other people, they maybe need half that amount of time, but they can have the connections to have people edit it quickly, or they know that if they send it off to their friends, they'll get the drafts back in 2 days. Whereas there's times when I was reviewing my essays, I had 15 drafts, so it was a lot of drafts. You don't need 15 drafts, but I definitely wanted to get as many well-rounded opinions on it as possible. And they were friends that I had. There are people in my family who have no medical background and were able to understand what I was writing, and so that was helpful to me. They were friends who were not applying. Not to say that you can't have people review your application if they are applying. It just removes that potential issue or bias of plagiarism. Not to say that happens intentionally, but I just find it was helpful to connect with friends who had already applied and they got in last year, or so they're actually medical students and have that experience, or they were a year below me and weren't even considering applying to medical school. So even though I would prepare with those friends in other ways, it wouldn't have been for my application.
Right. And then there's other free resources on your campus, I would hope. Which would be any writing center that you have access to. Also the Career Center, they should help you with this stuff, especially if you have to prepare a CV, like our MD, PhD applicants making their academic CV, they can look over that for you. So just reach wide. If you're a grad student, there's grad student writing sessions that you could probably attend and network and get people to look at it. So I think time is important. Like, I mean, anything in life, if you do it last minute, you're going to end up being hit up with extra expenses, premium shipping if you're not a Prime member, the different things like that. So the more time you have to research and network, the better with the application for sure.
And if you don't have, like, let's say you go to a school where those centers aren't catered towards applications, you can also look in the community. So see if your library has writing classes, or if there's people who they write short stories regularly, they might edit for free. Like that might be a part of their role at the library, is helping students. So it might be high school students, but they still do that work of editing. So you might be able to consult resources at your local library if that's possible.
Be creative, and then you do it yourself as well, which is, I think, very valuable. And it will sound like you. Like that's the important part of these essays, is for the reviewers to understand who you are. So you got to keep sight of that. And that's where I think a lot of people have mentioned getting their family involved, and that their family was the hardest to get involved because they're sort of like, what is this? This doesn't even sound like you.
Exactly.
So they went back to the drawing board and tried again and tried to make it not only that academic side of themselves, but that authentic side that their mom loves,
because that's who they are authentically. And that's what the committee wants to see. It's like, who are you as a person?
That's what shines when you're applying. So we now have the perfect application. You of course have a 4.0. Well, you don't have to have a 4.0, but we're all set. All of your interview invitations are streaming in, and then all of a sudden you realize, oh my gosh, there's some more expenses coming in. I wish I had planned for these. So what kind of expenses can people plan for and budget for now when they're thinking about going to interviews? Say you're maybe located in Hamilton and you're kind of scooting out to Ontario schools, just to limit it a little bit.
Well, just the transportation costs and preparation costs. Again, that's something that we do offer for free in terms of mock interviews. But I think just going back to, so you are going to an interview, you want to give the best first impression that you can. And so for students, what we've seen in the past is just like dressing, hotel costs. To buy a suit,
honestly, like and really the suit is well, you wear what you want, but it's pretty standard that you would need a suit. I don't think I'm blowing anyone's mind saying that.
That's something hopefully it's we're working on to see if we can develop some sort of a system to give students access to like lower cost alternatives there, because those are actually being used by professional networks in the GTA right now. So we're trying to see if we can develop something similar for COS students with upcoming interviews.
That's a great idea.
But I think the three main ones would be dressing, transportation costs to the school, because you're not going to be traveling there and the other one would be like hotel or accommodation costs, because you're not going to be traveling there the day of your interview.
No.
Right.
Yeah,
So
especially
you have
in
to
the
be there.
morning, like
Exactly.
if your sessions that you should be there for like 7 a.m., that is not
Yeah.
possible.
Yeah. And I mean, the stress of it, the snowstorms and the rainstorms. Unfortunately, it's a weird time, for instance, in Toronto. I'm sure in Ottawa too, where you can get a big snowstorm still with some of those application or interview days. But, So travel,
hopefully not.
accommodation,
Knock on wood.
clothing, and then we were talking interview prep. And again, all of those resources we were talking about for your application preparation, your career center might have MMI and MPI sessions. U of T's does, and then of course your pre-med club. I've heard. Did you practice with friends?
Yeah, so when I was at Western, I was the president of Western Future Acquisitions, which was a COS chapter, still is a COS chapter. And we did this thing where we would connect students. We had a poll and we just saw who was applying this year, and then we would connect people so they would practice regularly. And it's funny because two of the people I prepped with are in my year.
Oh,
so
wow.
we all got in together, which was really great. It made it a sweeter victory because we were all there to support each other. But I definitely would encourage working with people who are currently applying, because you get to assess what your strengths are, you get to assess what their strengths are, and you kind of bounce ideas off of each other. And something as little as like the timing of your interviews, that's something that you won't really get until you do a prep interview with COS or with your career center. Sometimes 2 minutes feels like an hour. So other times 2 minutes feels like 2 seconds. So when you have the actual structure of that interview, you knocking on the door, you walking in, all of the anxiety that comes with that experience, like you know how to deal with it by the time your interview is happening.
Yeah. And that's something that I hear a lot of from the students that have gone through, like, because they've come through, or they've gotten admitted successfully in now, like this past year, their first year students from COS that were now doing the prep for the students with interviews from this past cycle. And that's something that they remarked upon, was just that practice. And, it really gets rid of the nerves because you've done it before, right? So getting as much practice you can, like serious practice, not people like making jokes when you're giving your answers to the questions, but actually going through it like it's the real thing, dressing up like it's an interview as well, like being pretty serious about it. Yeah.
And even taking notes on some of the comments that you did make, because sometimes you literally just phase out and then you're still talking and you don't even remember what is said. So if the person across of you, whether it's a friend or a colleague, I know you did this for me when I had my mock interview, but writing down notes of some of those key concepts that you discussed and ensuring that you can reflect back on them and realize, like, was that actually me talking, or was that something else that I had learned? Or because it ensures that you're actually providing information that represents you as a person.
I like that.
Yeah, so taking notes and making sure to review those notes of your mock interviews is something that I didn't start doing until partway through, and I realized it was helpful for me when I started.
Yeah. Those are great tips.
Yeah, we also have, we started with one of our first year students, Mohammed al-Baghdadi, a public speaking group within COS.
Like a Toastmasters thing?
Yeah, exactly. Similar to that. And so part of it's also just working over a period of time on your communication skills too, because I think even in terms of preparing for interviews, some students, it's really it's really quick. They already have like the foundation there. And so it's just tweaking and getting some of the mechanics down. And for other students, they might just be very nervous in terms of expressing themselves to someone that they're just meeting for the first time. And so they would need like I would say like a longer period to kind of build up those communication skills. So the longer, and I think that's just a good professional thing to have, because regardless if you're going to medical school or not, like you're going to have to be interviewing for jobs or pitching ideas to people. So those are just good skills to have for yourself in the future. And
then making sure you've budgeted the resources accordingly to how long you'll need to interview. Some people might only need 3 mock interviews and they feel set. I needed 7. So and that included working with Ike, it included working with friends. So in terms of whether you'll purchase professional interview prep, or you'll consult your school, or you'll work with friends, like those are things you should set up over time so that you have enough time to reflect on the experiences. So if you do them back to back, there's times where you realize you've run out of the resources because you have no one else to interview you. So if you have that schedule and then you know exactly what resources you have, you can allocate them accordingly, and hopefully the money that is required, or if there's no money required at all, you'll have exactly what you need to succeed.
And I think, you know, everyone wants to think that they get in the first time that they apply to med school, and really the way to really help that happen is to make it feel like it's the second time you've done it. You know, if you practice enough and the first time you do it isn't like jittery brand new, because unfortunately all of these costs we're talking about, if you have to reapply, are doubled. It's not, the math is simple. So
pretty much,
we want you to be successful the first time. We really do. But something that I wanted to mention too, because Ike and I had chatted about these costs with the U of T registrars and registrarial staff, is show up in your registrar's office, whoever's in charge of finance and bursaries, and ask if you are having trouble making ends meet so that you can travel somewhere like Ottawa for the weekend, and see if they have any bursaries available or if there's any financial help for something like that. It's definitely worth asking, because sometimes, you know, there's just strange little pots of money available.
Yeah, no, and as a result of some of our conversations with those registrars, I think now they're looking at allocating pots of funding to keep this in mind for students who are applying.
Yeah, I don't think when people don't sit down and really like
add it all up.
Yeah, when it's added up, it's
pretty expensive.
Pretty expensive, exactly. And it can skyrocket if you're not aware of what you're spending and make some planning. It can be a lot. And then we didn't even talk about applying internationally, because we don't want you to. We want you to stay here in Canada. But those would be extra expenses as well, of course. So the one last thing we wanted to talk about was just about, you know, managing work while this is going on. Is it even possible? How do you work and prep for med school at the same time? Is it recommended, or do you just need to, I don't know, figure out a way to do it without work? Any ideas, any suggestions?
No, we were talking quite a bit earlier about opportunity cost, and that sense of when you invest time into something, it takes time away from something else. So prepping for the MCAT over the course of a summer, and if you're an undergrad, that's 4 months of time. That's 4 months of income that you could be making that you sometimes have to sacrifice. So talking to different people, some people decide to take the whole summer off and just focus on the MCAT. Other people, they had a full-time job and did the MCAT. For me, I had a part-time job on the weekends. And so it wasn't anything glamorous. Like, I served at weddings, which was a lot of fun.
Oh, that's perfect.
Yeah. So it was Saturday and Sunday. And then it was something that I could do on the side. And then, so I treated the MCAT like my full-time job during the week from Monday to Friday. And then I treated my job, the part-time job, as my weekend job. And obviously I still had fun in the summer too. And that's something people don't really consider, is like, you have no time for yourself. But it's been shown that when you provide yourself with rest time, you're more productive in the time that you actually do that work in. And so I would recommend, for me, it was a portion of the money that I would have made if I had worked all summer, but I only ended up taking the MCAT one time. So I actually saved money technically, and not having to pay again, and then not having to spend like a whole other summer studying for it. So that was really helpful. And I would say, even if it's not a job that you do, there's also value in developing skills in the summer, because once again, 4 months of your 12 months. So if you were volunteering in a lab, or if that lab isn't able to provide you with a stipend, or if you were doing work in a hospital, or you were, you know, working at City Hall, there's different things you can do that are not necessarily science oriented that still provide you with skill development and are enjoyable to you. So you don't need to do something very specific to science. You can do something in another realm of interest that at least builds your character and builds your experience.
Definitely. I mean, I would argue that doing helping with wedding receptions would give you actually more of the skills that you need as a doctor than working in a lab. I mean, doctors don't sit around working in labs that often, unless you're a clinician scientist. But you are talking to random people all day. It's basically a customer service job. People don't think of it that way, but you're dealing with people that you don't know very well, and those people skills are so important. So it's just, I mean, if you're interested in this stuff, we have other Facebook Lives about it, about sort of what kind of experience to get. But I always just plug that it's not the experience you get, it's how you, what am I trying to say? It's how you interpret it and articulate it. Yeah. I couldn't articulate how
you did it.
You got there.
I always need help.
There's a moral of the story right there.
Yeah.
And then I wanted to just give a plug as well with work. If you do need to work during your undergrad, Everyone really focuses on the weighted GPA, but if you know maybe you're watching this and you're quite a few years out from applying to med school, you know that you're someone who needs to have a part-time job. You need to be a full-time student for 2 years in order for us to calculate a GPA for you in order to apply for med school. I mean, things change. So of course, if you are just starting your undergrad, keep track of it. But you don't have to carry a full course load. And people kind of get into this trap that they want to carry the full course load, and then it's a heavy thing to do. And so then they have to carry it because they didn't do well in a course. Be honest with yourself. If you're going to be really successful, because you have to work, and carrying 5 courses is going to be really a stretch for you, then do 4. Like, you don't have to do 5 and do really well in those 4. So you don't need the weighted GPA in the future. And then of course you can drop to part-time if you need to and be working, and you can be part-time student, prep for MCAT, maybe work on the side. Like, these alternatives are possible. There's not one way into med school. So you can always email our office to ask, about what you're thinking of doing, and we can let you know, how it would work with your application. And I would recommend doing that. And I will add our email address to the comments. Is there anything we're forgetting?
No, you can do it.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yes, being positive.
Yeah.
Don't let these costs stop you. We're doing this so that you can plan ahead for these things, and it's not alarming and throwing you off for your interview when you realize you have to scrape together $500 to get to Vancouver. If only it were $500 or whatever. Because also that's the frustrating thing. You get that interview invitation. How many weeks?
3 to 5 weeks potentially. Sometimes 2 weeks before.
Yeah. So if you're looking at flights, you don't get the luxury of shopping around for the best price. So but don't let that stop you. Just plan for it.
Also, COS has access to, there's some resources we put together where we have a breakdown of all of these costs that we mentioned today. And then there's also an explanation of like a further explanation of those costs and ways that you could save money. That's like in our Ignite toolkit. So you could also contact Kendra or Ike for access to those resources.
Great. Well, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you.
We have a question that just popped up, but I will answer that on the side because it's very specific. Thanks for everyone who has watched this all the way through. It's a little bit long, but we hope that it's been helpful. And we wish you luck with your med school applications. We hope we get to meet you one day.